Well, if I were to ask you off the top of your head what the greatest K-State football win of all time is, what would you say?
Wow, I would say that, but I'm going to give you. I'm going to put some. I'm going to throw a little bit of shade on this bracket. I would say the 03 Big 12 championship win at Arrowhead over Oklahoma, considering the opponent, considering the circumstances. Now, the 2011 title, right, would be, but there was no playoff game, and so just different. But if we're going to throw those two out there, then I'm going to throw one in that you didn't even have in your bracket, and I need to talk to the committee here. This would be me, and if we were doing the NCAA analogy here, I would be on some Skype call with the committee going, what are we thinking about? Because if we're going to put the two conference championship games here, the Colin Klein-led title and the 03 Sproles-led title, then we've got to put on the 1934 game, winning the Big Six title at Nebraska. Can't believe it wasn't even in the tournament.
Hey, that's a fair point, and I'll be honest. I was completely unaware of that game. So what's the backstory here on this one?
November 29th, 1934. And as much as we love that 1998 win over Nebraska, it was not a game to win the conference championship. This one was in Lincoln. Now, it's interesting when you go back and research this game, the writing has changed so dramatically. I guess maybe we circle back to it, but the Omaha World Herald story, getting from the Nebraska perspective, they reference K-State football coach, who eventually I think would go into the College Football Hall of Fame, Lynn Pappy Waldorf, as Fat Lynn Waldorf. So he's called that in the story. Fat Lynn Waldorf brought his Wildcats to Lincoln. It's a showdown. Here's another reason why this game is it should be in the tournament and under consideration. The winner was going to win the conference. It's a showdown game. And if Nebraska wins this game, it would be their sixth Big Six title in 7 years. K-State had never won it. Now, K-State under Lynn Pappy Waldorf, a.k.a. Fat Lynn Waldorf, according to the Omaha World Herald, good team. All-American and George Maddox, the best lineman in the Big Six that year. They had a dude named Maurice Elder who was great in this game. I met Leo Ayres later. I remember when these guys had a reunion back when I was being the voice of the Wildcats, and I remember meeting some of these guys, and they were awesome. But Nebraska's in control of the game. Cold, dreary day, but it's Thanksgiving in Lincoln. Everything's on the line. The Huskers are leading 7-0 and in control until Oren Stoner. That Oren Stoner had a 37-yard run that flipped the game in K-State's favor. They mentioned the linemen for K-State, Freeland, Flenthorpe, Sundgren, Schaefer, Bob Cork. But Nebraska was starting to feel K-State's pressure, and late in the third quarter, K-State gets a touchdown. Maurice Elder gets a score. I think Oren Stoner also had 2 touchdowns and kicked a PAT, and the Cats win 19-7 and bring home the trophy with Fat Lynn Waldorf leading the way. And in fact, I'm going to give you the last line of the article that I found from the Omaha World Herald. At the very least, a bow from this is the last line of the story. At the very least, a bow from the hips to Fat Lynn Waldorf.
Wow. Man, how about that? The Omaha World Herald.
Yep.
Throwing some shade.
You know, the angst and acrimony between K-State and Nebraska was there in 1934, but this was for all the marbles. So it's very similar to the 03 game where it was a showdown game between OU and K-State. Whoever won the title, and this is the same game. It just wasn't, it's in the middle of the Great Depression, and it wasn't on television, and we can't let these just drift into oblivion.
Well, I like that, and I also like, you brought up to me earlier today, there was a game, am I getting this right, 1953, K-State, Kansas?
Yeah, there's another one here. Now, this wasn't for a title, although K-State had a chance to win the title that year, but they lost to, Oklahoma was the Alabama of college football in the 1950s. They just didn't lose, and if they did, it was, every third year, and the world basically stopped rotating. But K-State had really struggled against Kansas. They had just been bludgeoned by them. They won in 1944, but the post-World War II era for K-State was really set them up for misery in the 60s and struggling in the 50s. But Bill Meek had him a team in 1953, and Verl Schweitzer led the way. K-State was one of the first to really integrate, especially in the old Big Seven. Harold Robinson from Manhattan was an all Big Seven center. And then Verl Schweitzer from Nicodemus out in Graham County ran for 167 yards in this game. But K-State got a win on national television. This game was on NBC. They would pick a game from around the country and feature it. Well, they featured Kansas and Kansas State in Lawrence on November 7, 1953. K-State dominated the game, 350 yards in rushing. KU only had 108 total yards, but K-State only got a Bernie Dudley 11-yard touchdown run. It was big because it was on national television and turned the tide for K-State, at least momentarily, against Kansas. It led to a 3-game winning streak against Kansas. And I've got another one that's not in your tournament, I don't think.
Go for it.
1994, Thursday night on ESPN.
Oh,
national
no, this made
audience.
it. This made it, Mitch.
This
was in.
Well, where'd it go? Where was it seeded? It
So
feels like a Missouri Valley team that should have been seeded higher.
Yeah, I believe it was an 8-9 game. It was up against 1993 Kansas. That's all I remember. It was 93 Kansas against 94 Kansas in the first round.
And which team won? Which game won it?
94 did advance. Mason, if you could look up where
then they're
it
against
lost.
the 1 seed. This is where I'm going to the committee and saying you haven't seeded this tournament properly. So look it up. Did they beat the 93 game? The 93 game was noteworthy because it was the 10-9 game on 10-9. K-State beat KU in Manhattan 10-9 on October the 9th.
So the 94 game was the 8 seed. They won their first matchup 84-16, but then they lost 98-2 to 1998 Nebraska in the second round. So a tough go for them.
Okay, so the 98 Nebraska game, though, led to, okay, let me beg to differ here and stand on my soapbox. Thursday night ESPN game. K-State had last one in Lawrence in 1969. That's 16 seasons, 15 years. And prior to that, it was another 15 years because that was the end of the 3-game winning streak I was talking about. They win in 1953 in Lawrence, 1955 in Lawrence. They don't win again until 1969. They don't win again till this game. Well, KU was good. They were loaded. It was the precursor to the 95 game, which is up there too, between two ranked teams. But this turned the tide and completely flipped the series to where it is today. Because from World War II, prior to 1982, K-State won 7 games against Kansas, lost 28, and tied 1. And I mentioned the futility in Lawrence. Well, this game was noteworthy. It was played on a Thursday night, so it was different. It felt different. It wasn't a Saturday afternoon at 1:30 game, and it was on national television. Well, J.J. Smith had a big game. K-State wins it. Chad May was throwing bullets all over the place. K-State had time of possession of 41 minutes in this game. May went 33 of 44 for 379. They had an 8-minute and 40-second drive. In the third quarter, Rod Schiller pounds it in for a yard out, and K-State led 21-0, ended up winning 21-13. First time since 1931 they had won 7 wins in a row. I understand about the 98 Nebraska K-State game. I get it. It was 30 years since K-State had beaten Nebraska, and it was all this Husker angst and pulling teeth, getting close, couldn't beat them. But this 94 game against Kansas on ESPN flipped the entire series because take away the 3 years of Ron Prince, right? That's the 3 years KU won 3 years in a row. KU's won one time, I think, right? 04. Am I off on this?
No, that's correct.
Okay, 04. That's it. This game flipped it for 30 years, close to 30 years. And so I'm going to argue against the 8-9 seed. This game should have been, a 2 or 3 seed, and it sure shouldn't have played the 98 Nebraska win in the round of 32.
Mitch Holthus talking with us. Definitely a tough draw. I will not argue with you on that. Now, I'm going to ask you about another game that was an 8-9 here because I felt like, and I was the one that seeded it, but I did feel like in retrospect I probably gave this game too poor of a seed. 1991 Indiana State, so it's in the novelty region. We're talking about novelty here.
Sure.
K-State wins because they get the pick 2 basically at the end of the game. They run back a 2-point conversion when Indiana State's trying to go up by 3. Well, what can you tell us about that game?
First ever pick 2 in the history of college football. I'm getting myopic here. I've had the pleasure, I should put this on my Wikipedia page. I called the first pick 2 in college football history and the first pick 2, the only pick 2 in NFL history in the 2016 play by Eric Berry against the Atlanta Falcons. Indiana State's not very good. They're okay. Dennis Rates is a good coach. They had a guy named Swan. I want to say it's Eric Swan, who was an NFL receiver that was just eating K-State up. Keep in mind, this is the third year of Bill Snyder. So 1-9 the first year, but he beats North Texas, and K-State wins. Hernandez, he got it. All right, 1990, K-State gets 2 big 8 wins, winning at home over Oklahoma State and Iowa State, and a 5-win season. They start 91, and they're going to lose to Indiana State, who was not very good. And so, but Indiana State's up by 1. Why not go for 2? It's stupid to kick a field goal and be up by 2. And this is the first year the pick 2 was put in place. The first week that the pick 2 could have been, it was week 1 of the season. And then the runs it all the way back, William Price, right? And the only thing I got mad about was Weber jumps in the middle of my call. Because if it's intercepted, it'll give K-State he says he'll give K-State the lead. I'm getting ready to say he's going to give K-State the lead. So, because I go, this could be returned for 2. And he goes, it could get K-State the lead. I'm getting ready to say that, Stan. So just let me say it. Then you can jump in after that. But, yeah, that's a great novelty game. I'm curious who's in that novelty region.
Mason, you got the novelty. I know Texas A&M was the 1 seed there from 2011, the 4 overtime game.
Right.
Our regional championship for the novelty game ended up being the 4 overtime A&M game from 2011, and then K-State's crazy win in 2015 against Iowa State after being down 21 at halftime and Iowa State fumbling the ball away.
Well, here's one game from that region I want to ask you about, Mitch, because it's one of my personal favorites, because I can remember listening to the radio with my dad for this game, and it's 1995 Cincinnati when K-State wins on the last play of the game.
And it was the play that K-State ran time and time again, where they would spin May out. He runs out and throws all the way across the field opposite, kind of a Mahomes play. So he gets the defense flowing. This is a favorite Bill Snyder play. He gets the defense flowing play side, and then May had the arm strength to throw all the way across the field and get it to Kevin Lockett. And so I can still see the game play. The game is plain as day. And here's what I also remember about the game is I had was this May that throw this? Or am I on the quarterback?
Matt Miller.
Sorry, Matt Miller in his 1 year. We had these transfer guys. Matt Miller came in to throw. Yeah, my bad, Matt Miller, who had, was an underrated player. Sorry. He wore 6 and Chad May wore 5. I guess and they were about the same size. They were almost like the same kind of dude. But I remember going crazy in that game. You're listening to it with your dad. Well, I'm flying home. I've got to still do the Bill Snyder show when we get home that night. And I've got to do the Chiefs-New York Giants the next day. And my voice is pretty much shot. And I'm thinking, man, I hope this is not I hope it's a blowout. I hope the Chiefs win 50-0. And I'm just kind of walking through it. Well, it was an overtime game. Came down to a kick in overtime. And I remember, feeling like I needed IVs after that weekend because it was two just thrilling back-to-back games.
Mitch Holthus is talking with us here. I've got a couple more that I want to ask you about. I feel like the 1995 team and the 1995 defense in particular doesn't get enough run for how good they were, and it seemed like the Holiday Bowl was a pretty good showcase of that when K-State just smacked Colorado State.
Yeah, and Brian Kavanaugh had to play because there was injuries at quarterback to Miller. But that defense, I remember the week of the Kansas game. Remember, Kansas now was ranked 6th in the country. K-State was ranked 14th. And I remember seeing Bob Stoops that week, still K-State defensive coordinator, and he's going, here's what we're going to do to these guys, and we might crush them. He goes, we just might crush these guys. And he's kind of showing me, his thought process. And I remember, too, because Mark Williams was quarterbacking for Kansas, one of the first plays of the game, Purcell Gaskins flies over like Derek Johnson did for Texas later. He flies over this Purcell Gaskins. Remember, he's like a 6'10" high jumper. And he just flew over Kansas offensive line and drills Mark Williams. And it was like, that's the way this is going to be all day. And it was, it was just a thrashing, 41-7. I think that game really, so it dovetails onto the 94 win that we talked about several minutes ago. But it also was like Glenn Mason goes, I'm not going to stay here. I got to the 92 Aloha Bowl and I had NFL dudes, but I'm not going to sit here and take this. So I'm out of here. I'll go to Minnesota, and that's where Terry Allen took over. And then just the complete dominance happened from that 95 game. But people forget Kansas was ranked 6th in the nation that week.
I have a question about that game, too, because when I go back and watch the highlights of it, you were doing the TV broadcast for that game, correct?
They did. Here's what happened on that. Coach Snyder asked me to do the TV on that game because Greg Sharp filled in and did the radio. They had decided to do a pay-per-view for that game. Nobody picked it up, if I'm not mistaken. Look, see if I'm mistaken here. I don't think anybody picked it up. It was not a ESPN game. It wasn't a ABC game. And they decided, because the teams were so good, and there was an uproar of why the game was not on standard, analog television, that they go, we're going to do a pay-per-view, but we're going to split the money with KU. Well, David Lawrence, who still does color for KU football, is going to do color for KU. And Coach Snyder said, we want you to do the play-by-play. We need balance here. And I said, okay, I'm in. Now, I don't want to get this confused with the 97 game, because basically the 97 game in Manhattan was the same thing. Because I didn't do the game, I wasn't doing the game on television for ESPN or ABC. So I'm pretty sure it was a pay-per-view game, and it was supposed to be this, everybody's going to, pay a load of money to buy this game in case they just dominated. You might double-check me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. That's why I did the game on TV.
No, I believe you are correct on that. And I just remember thinking, man, because you have to broadcast that differently, right? You can't be over the top when K-State is just drilling Kansas.
No. I got ripped, actually, because K-State was blowing them out, and I couldn't be my normal Mitchie stuff for K-State because I'm like, well, now it's 28-7, and but shucks, hey, one team's really way far ahead, and the other team's way far behind. It's not when you're doing the voice of the team. So, yeah, I was like trying to be politically correct that whole game, but it was super hard to be politically correct because K-State just dominated. The same thing happened in 97. I did a game pay-per-view, but now I'm doing the Chiefs, and I'm not doing K-State radio anymore. And Coach asked me to do that game. He said, I got to have you do this game. Well, we're going to Jacksonville the next day, and I'm not going to be able to go on the charter. And now I'm back into my 94 and 95 mode where I'm getting private planes. I'm trying to, whatever extra money I'm making on doing the Chiefs, I'm spending on getting transportation so I can get from the Saturday K-State game to the Sunday Chiefs game. Well, that's not an issue in 97 for the KU K-State game, but I've got to get to Jacksonville pretty much on my own dime. Well, they're going to pay me $500 to do that K-State game, and I said, Coach, I can't do it. I got to, that's going to wear. I'm just trying not to do that. He calls 3 or 4 different times. Well, okay, Coach, I'll do it. Well, it cost me maybe $200 and some bucks to get the airline ticket to get to Jacksonville, then the cab to get to the hotel before Uber. But I'm losing my voice in the second half of that K-State game. I'm thinking I'm not going to have a voice for tomorrow's Jacksonville game, which I didn't. I did a game with laryngitis against Jacksonville. It was horrible. It's just it was a nightmare. And then the next day, Greg Hall, who just passed away, used to write a column critiquing the media. And that next Monday after the Jacksonville game, completely rips my face off for doing the Jacksonville game. He did the K-State game the day before, and he's trying to double dip, and he's cheating the Chiefs on this, and I lost money on the deal. I mean, so that was my K-State pay-per-view 2 games with K-State KU.
Man,
I'm sure the 97 game wasn't in the tournament anywhere because that that was just another blowout in the middle of those K-State blowout KU every year games.
Yeah, no, it was ho-hum by that point. But that's Bill Snyder just expecting everybody to have Bill Snyder work ethic right there is what that sounds like to me.
Well, I think I kind of got that work ethic, but it was just health matters, right?
Right.
And then, I mean, I was gargling everything I could find. And I'm on the plane flying a bit, kind of a latest plane I could get out of Kansas City because I had to hustle back to get from the stadium to KCI. And I'm losing my voice, and I'm trying to gargle. Give me whatever you give me, like airline fluid or something, because when I got to Jacksonville, I was just terrified. It was a bad weekend. Let's put it that way.
Well, I could sit here and do this all day, but I know we're way up against the clock here, Mitch.
I've got issues. How does the 34 fat Lynn Pepe Waldorf team, according to the Omaha World Herald, not me? They call him Fat Lynn Waldorf for the story. Anyway, how does that not make the tournament when they win the conference title, winning in Lincoln in a winner-take-all game on Thanksgiving 1934?
Well, it was in the first four out.
Oh, my gosh, they were in Dayton.
Yes. If
Lynn Waldorf.
If we had expanded to 68, it would have been played in Dayton. Mitch.
Okay, then just give me this. Leo Ayers, George Maddox, Maurice Elder, Owen Stoner, Sundgren Flinthorpe, Freeland Schaefer, Ben Cork. We remember you as being champions for the Kansas State Wildcats.